Welcome to Fantasy Booking. This is the series where I show how I would book an angle or a wrestler or even a pay-per-view. Today, we will be looking into how I would book the entirety of WWE in 2021. As the year is coming to an end, I think it will be a good thing to make a video about how 2021 would turn out if I was in charge of the main event picture. I will be booking the main men's and main women's championships, namely, WWE Championship and Raw Women's Championship from Raw, and Universal Championship and SmackDown Women's Championship. We will start at January, namely Royal Rumble, to December, namely DLC. Let us consider that the champions at the beginning of the year are the same as right now, that is, McIntyre as WWE Champ, Reigns as Universal Champ, Asuka as Raw Women's Champ, and Sasha Banks as SmackDown Women's Champ. Alright. Let's begin. Alright, so, I will be proceeding month by month. Let's start at Royal Rumble. Sasha Banks faces Carmella for the SmackDown Women's Championship. McIntyre faces Sheamus for the WWE Championship. Asuka defends her Raw Women's Championship against Nia Jax. And finally, the Universal Championship match between Kevin Owens and Roman Reigns. There are also the men's and women's Royal Rumble matches. Let's get started with the results. All champions successfully defend the championship. As of the Rumble matches, Big E and Liv Morgan win their respective matches. This is according to my Royal Rumble booking. Click on the iCard above to watch them. Next up is Fastlane. Here, there are two championships being defended. First, the Universal Championship is on the line between Roman Reigns and Daniel Bryan. And second is the Raw Women's Championship, and the matches between Shayna Baszler and Asuka. Reigns is successfully able to defend the title, but Asuka is not, as Baszler makes her tap out and becomes the new Raw Women's Champion. The last pay-per-view before WrestleMania is Elimination Chamber. There are two chamber matches, one for the men and one for the women. Also, the other two championships are defended here, as McIntyre has a rematch with Sheamus for the WWE Championship, and Banks defends her SmackDown Women's Championship against Lacey Evans. Both champions defend, and they will be facing the winners of the Elimination Chamber, Shinsuke Nakamura and Bayley. So, the WrestleMania card looks like this: WWE Championship, Drew McIntyre vs Shinsuke Nakamura. Universal Championship, Roman Reigns, with Jey and Jimmy Uso, vs Big E, with Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods. Raw Women's Championship, Shayna Baszler vs Liv Morgan. SmackDown Women's Championship, Sasha Banks vs Bayley in 3 Stages of Hell. Here are the results. Shinsuke Nakamura becomes the new WWE Champion, Big E becomes the new Universal Champion, Liv Morgan becomes the new Raw Women's Champion, and Sasha Banks successfully retains her SmackDown Women's Championship. With WrestleMania over, we have a lot of new champions who won the World Championship for the very first time. Next up is Money in the Bank. All the top championships will be defended as always, along with the Money in the Bank matches. So, here are the matches. Nakamura vs McIntyre as a rematch for the WWE Championship. Big E defends his Universal Championship against Samoa Joe. Shayna Baszler faces Sasha for the SmackDown Women's Championship. And finally, Liv Morgan faces Ruby Riott for the Raw Women's Championship. The results are as follows: Nakamura, Big E and Morgan all successfully defend their championship, but Baszler manages to win the SmackDown Women's Championship. Also, the Money in the Bank briefcases are won by Sami Zayn and Charlotte Flair. At Backlash, Sasha Banks gets her rematch against Baszler for the SmackDown Women's Championship. Big E defends the Universal Championship against Aleister Black. On the Raw side of things, the WWE Championship is on the line at the Shinsuke Nakamura vs Sami Zayn match, and the Raw Women's Championship is defended by Liv Morgan in her match against Nia Jax. Here are the results of Backlash. Shayna Baszler successfully defends her title, Big E successfully defends his title, Shinsuke Nakamura successfully defends his title, and finally, against all odds, Liv Morgan successfully defends her title against Jax. However, after the match, Charlotte cashes in her Money in the Bank briefcase, and wins the Raw Women's Championship. Next up is Extreme Rules. We have a bunch of interesting matches, such as Nakamura vs Cesaro for the WWE Championship, Charlotte vs Liv for the Raw Women's Championship, Baszler vs Bayley for the SmackDown Women's Championship, and Big E vs Aleister Black in an Extreme Rules match for the Universal Championship. All champions, that is Nakamura, Big E, Baszler and Charlotte, successfully defend their respective championship. Finally, we come to the biggest party of the summer, SummerSlam. We have a bunch of triple threat matches for most of the championships. Asuka faces Charlotte for the Raw Women's Championship, for the SmackDown Women's Championship, a triple threat submission match among Banks, Bayley and Baszler takes place. For the WWE Championship, Cesaro, Zayn and Nakamura have a triple threat match. And finally, a New Day triple threat takes place for the Universal Championship. Here are all of the big results. Baszler makes Banks taps out to retain her title, Big E successfully retains his title, Asuka wins the Raw Women's Championship after pinning Charlotte, and Cesaro, finally becomes the WWE Champion. This leads to Payback. Just a week after SummerSlam, we have rematches between Nakamura and Cesaro, as well as Charlotte and Asuka for the WWE and Raw Women's Championship respectively. Additionally, Baszler defends her SmackDown Women's title against Naomi, while Big E faces Strowman at Payback with the Universal Championship on the line. All champions are successfully able to defend their titles. After the Nakamura-Cesaro match though, Zayn comes out and it looks like Zayn might cash it in, but he rather hugs Cesaro and both Nakamura and Zayn raise the champ's hand. After this, the draft takes place. Zayn and Rollins move over to SmackDown, while Reigns and Bayley move over to Raw. Also, Io Shirai is drafted to SmackDown after being called up from NXT, while Rhea Ripley is called from NXT to Raw. The first pay-per-view post-draft is Clash of Champions. Here, we see Cesaro and Seth Rollins clashing for the WWE Championship, Asuka fighting Nia Jax for the Raw Women's Championship, Baszler faces Tamina with the SmackDown Women's Championship on the line, and Big E facing Strowman for the Universal Championship, because their previous encounter at Payback ended with Strowman getting counted out. Cesaro, Asuka, Baszler and Big E all successfully defend. However, Big E is not able to walk out with the championship because Sami Zayn cashes in to win the Universal Championship, his first World Championship. Hell in a Cell has an interesting lineup of matches. Here, we will see Cesaro and Rollins inside the Hell in a Cell structure for the WWE Championship, Shayna Baszler defending her SmackDown Women's Championship title against Io Shirai, Asuka defending her title against Bayley inside Hell in a Cell, and a rematch between Big E and Sami Zayn for the Universal Championship. Here are the results. Cesaro successfully retains, Io Shirai wins the SmackDown Women's Championship, Asuka retains, and Sami Zayn retains using heel shenanigans. Next month is the month of brand warfare, that is, Survivor Series. Here, champion versus champion matches will take place between the champions of the respective brands. That is, Cesaro faces Sami Zayn, and Asuka faces Shirai. Here, I would like to see Sami Zayn win with his typical heel tactics, and Io Shirai winning, so that Asuka can put over the NXT rookie. The last month of the booking is December and, hence, TLC comes around. Here, Rhea Ripley faces Asuka for the Raw Women's Championship, Kevin Owens faces Sami Zayn for the Universal Championship, Io Shirai faces Baszler in a rematch for the title, and finally, The Tribal Chief Roman Reigns challenges Cesaro for the WWE Championship. Interestingly, Zayn and Shirai are able to retain the titles, but the other two are not. Ripley becomes the new Raw Women's Champion, while Roman low blows Cesaro and then makes him pass out using the guillotine to win the WWE Championship. I feel like the video would be incomplete without me telling you how this would affect the next WrestleMania. Here are how I would book WrestleMania 38 if this booking takes place. WWE Championship, Roman Reigns vs. Elimination Chamber winner Seth Rollins. Universal Championship, Sami Zayn vs. Royal Rumble winner, Daniel Bryan. Raw Women's Championship, Rhea Ripley vs. Elimination Chamber winner Charlotte Flair. SmackDown Women's Championship, Io Shirai vs. surprising Royal Rumble return and winner, Becky Lynch. Here are the results. Roman Reigns retains his WWE Championship, Daniel Bryan becomes the new Universal Champion, Rhea Ripley retains her Raw Women's Championship, and Becky Lynch becomes the new SmackDown Women's Champion. And that is it. That is how I would book all major WWE titles in 2021. Let me know if you enjoyed it and what to rebook next in the comment section below. Be sure to like, share and subscribe, that will help out the channel a lot. Thanks again, see you in the next one. /par